welcome back to my channel. Today I'm at my alma mater and it got me inspired to make a video about my experience at Harvard, the good, the bad, mostly the bad in this video, but I want to preface by saying that I loved it here. When people ask me what I thought of college, I say I had the best and worst of times. It's just a tumultuous experience, I think, for anyone going through it in their teens, but I think specifically Harvard came with a certain intensity that demanded more intensity. And today specifically I wanted to talk about 5 lessons that I learned here that I then had to unlearn after college. And I don't think they're Harvard specific, but obviously I'm just speaking to my experience. So the first lesson is you can and should always be doing more. And you've probably heard of the phrase work smarter, not harder. Well, apparently when I went to college, I hadn't heard that, or I hadn't internalized it, because it was always about working harder. I think what happens when you get a bunch of ambitious, hardworking people together is they can really push each other to grind as hard as ever. And I remember a pressure when I came to Harvard of doing a bunch of clubs and doing the hardest classes and going to the most parties, and maybe part of it came from high school, maybe it's self-selecting in that way, but I remember there being a very direct value placed on how much you were doing and how productive you came across or you appeared to be. You almost got street creds for sleeping the least. Like, you would go in and say, oh my god, the P set was brutal last night, I only got 2 hours of sleep, and someone would say, well, I pulled a full all-nighter, and it was like a weird competition, and I don't think we were really competing with each other. I think it was more about competing with this ideal of someone who both had a lot going on, which felt cool at the time, and also was persistent and tough enough to do the work involved in doing so much, and to not need the sleep and to not need hydration and rest, which is so absurd. I think so much of the emotional intensity and roller coaster that came with college was caused by not taking great care of like bodily, physical, essential needs that we had, that I just I don't even think I have the vocabulary around self-care to even begin to think about how to prioritize those things or slot them into my very overflowing calendar that I created for myself. No one was pushing me to do more except for myself, but I think it was a shared mentality that I certainly had to unlearn after college. And what happened after college, because I still hadn't unlearned the lesson and was surrounded by it for years, is I just jumped into my first job with the same mentality, and I worked really hard and really long hours, and I didn't take great care of myself, and I didn't rest, and I did too much outside of work too, and sort of burned on every end. And since then I have taken a very different approach due to having done things the hard way, the harder than needed way, where now I think doing less is way better than doing more, and it's all about prioritizing what matters most to you and investing in those areas so that you can really enjoy that investment, as opposed to spreading yourself thin and trying to do too much. And of course, always prioritizing the essentials first. Enough sleep, good hydration, eating properly, seeing friends, and making social connections above literally anything else. And this still happens, like when people try to make themselves appear really busy or overworked as like a status symbol. That does not impress me in the way that it used to. It doesn't impress me at all, because that's not the kind of life I want to lead anymore. The second lesson I had to unlearn is that the bar is excellence. The bar is near perfection. And I think this came from not just the culture, but the structure of Harvard. There is a joke that you think the hardest thing that you'll ever have to get into is the college, but once you get into the college, that's when the real applications and the rejections begin, because everything at the college feels exclusive. All the clubs have a rigorous application process, a lot of the classes have a rigorous application process, and it sets this threshold that in order to start something, in order to be a beginner, you already have to be an expert, which obviously is impossible. I'll give you 2 examples that come to mind. I, multiple semesters in a row, auditioned for an intro to improv class, and because it was a seminar for only 20 people, and they had over 100 applicants, the people that got into this intro to improv class, which is for beginners, allegedly, were the people that were the best at that audition. Turns out those were not beginners at improv, but I was not good enough to take a class on how to become better at improv, and so I never got into it. Same went with plays and musicals, and yeah, there are a few opportunities here and there where anyone can just join, but most of the real productions require an audition process, and the people that tend to get the roles are the ones that are already great at acting, that have done a lot of productions in high school. And I was on the other side of that with a cappella, so I was in one of the co-ed a cappella groups, and those groups are very competitive to get into as well because so many people audition, and we couldn't take the people that weren't good singers, that hadn't really sung before, unless they had like an inherent talent and musicality, which rarely happens without a little bit of musical exposure in high school. That just meant that you could be involved if you already had experience and were already at a pretty high level. There are benefits that come with that. It means that while you're in the group, you're surrounded by essentially experts or people that are really intense about that thing that you're passionate about, and so they get to push you farther, you get to learn from them, you get to do really cool things together. But we had to turn away during auditions so many people that were so excited about being a part of the social community of a cappella and just weren't good enough singers because they didn't have the training and because we weren't giving them the opportunity to learn how to become a better singer in our group. You had to start out pretty good. So those are sort of the pros and cons of having this culture where the bar was already pretty high to get started. And I would say after college, what that led to is thinking that I had to be good at everything that I started, which could be quite demoralizing. I almost wouldn't do things because I thought I would be bad at them. A good example of that is painting. Like, I had always wanted to get into painting, and I would make a painting or take a painting class, and the first painting I would make would not live up to the standards in my head because I had seen people that were good at painting make, better, more realistic paintings, and so I felt unsatisfied with the result. Where really the point was just to be a beginner, not take it so seriously. It doesn't matter so much. Just have fun. And the way you gain skills and get to that level that's in your head is first you have to be bad at the thing. Even making a YouTube channel took me years and years. And I would make videos and I would post them and then I would take them down. I would make videos and I would take them down because they didn't live up to the bar that I had set up in my head. But how could they be that good? Because I had never done it before. The bar to start should be the lowest it'll ever be. And that's something I've had to unlearn and take with me into adulthood. I think there's something beautiful in trying something out and also lowering the bar on the effort that has to come with it. I remember in my first job as well, every task I thought had to be done exceptionally well. And some tasks were not that important. It would have been fine to spend 3 hours instead of 8 hours on a deck for a customer. It wouldn't have made a difference. Not everything has a bar of excellence. It's about priorities. Some things require high quality. Maybe certain parts of your job do. Maybe certain parts of your social life. Maybe it's a hobby that you want to be really skilled in. Maybe those require a bar of excellence. Everything else just kind of have fun with and not take as seriously and not put as much effort into, and it's totally fine. You won't get in trouble. The next lesson I had to unlearn is that there is a quote-unquote preferred path. Now, it wasn't that I didn't meet students walking all paths of life. I mean, even in terms of their studies, I had friends that studied art history and economics and physics and religion, and they all had different dreams for themselves, and it was certainly acceptable to have various kinds of jobs after college. But I would say probably half of those friends ended up in consulting. So even if they got there via a different way, there was sort of like an end destination that was considered good enough after college. And if you look at this recent class of 2026, over half the grads work in either consulting, finance, or tech. And I think it speaks to this expectation that people have after college to sustain the prestige that they felt after having gotten into Harvard. It is a self-selecting group in the sense that the people that come here clearly care about prestige, or their families care about prestige, because it is quite expensive to go here, even with financial aid. And also, you hear it all around you. You get validation from people that find out that that's where you go to school. I guess to some extent, it makes sense that a lot of students wanted a quote-unquote prestigious and or high-paying job because they didn't come from financially well-off backgrounds. Their families had made big sacrifices for them to be there, so they wanted to make sure that their sacrifices were worthwhile. And even if they didn't come from a background like that, the Harvard name carries a certain expectation. You don't want to be the failure that went to Harvard and then didn't get a good job. It sort of feels better to prove to everyone that you did deserve to go here and you are good enough to succeed in the professional world, which is what everyone expects from you after you graduate. And you can have prestige in any field, right? So there is a difference between getting like a big tech job in SF or New York versus like a boutique startup in Ohio. Or if you're going to do a master's or PhD program, there's different levels of prestige depending on the program or the school that you're going to. Nowadays, I don't have the same type of judgment that I had when I went to school here, but I remember the time around graduation. It was on everyone's minds, and you weren't, again, competing with anyone specifically, but you wanted to have a job that sounded good. Maybe there was a minority of students that didn't care about how it looked and just followed their hearts, and I think they were ahead of the rest of us is what I've now realized, because prestige doesn't bring fulfillment, money doesn't bring happiness. And while I prioritized those things when I was at Harvard, because everyone around me seemed to, now I prioritize fulfillment, passion, joy, while having enough to meet the essentials. The fourth lesson I had to unlearn is going to rub some people the wrong way. It is that you are special. And a lot of people, I think, heard that in high school. You're so smart, you're gonna be so successful. I think the inherent assumption with that statement, when it's said as a compliment, which it often is that if you're special, that other people aren't special. And that can breed enormous expectation on yourself to be the best at something, when maybe that's not required for your own happiness. And also can breed a sense of entitlement, because I'm special, so things are gonna go my way. I think it can be really hard for some people to grasp. It even was for me, I'll admit it. Because I did feel special before I came to Harvard. And a lot of people that get in were their high school's valedictorian or had won some sort of national championship and were the best at something. And then when they came here, what you learn is that there's always going to be someone that's better at you at almost anything, at your major, at your hobbies, at making friends and having an insane social life, looking better, getting the material, picking it up faster than you, getting the better job. And that's going to be true after you graduate as well. And with social media, it's even easier to get access to other people's successes in any arena of life. So the way I've reframed that lesson is, firstly, I'm not special. And if I am, so is everyone else. And the question isn't, how do I hold on to that signal of value? Which it isn't really. We all end up in the same place. It's what specifically makes me unique, and what is the unique value that I contribute to society or to the people around me. And everyone has that thing. Also, ultimately, hard work and persistence will beat talent and intelligence every time. So the way to become an expert and the best at something is usually to put in a lot of work over a long period of time. And the way you get there is you you have to enjoy what you're doing. The more you enjoy it, the easier it'll be to put in those reps. If you're going to become an expert, don't do it to be special. Do it because you love what it is that you're trying to become special at. The last lesson I had to unlearn, lesson number 5, is the clock starts now, aka life is a race. I felt an enormous amount of time pressure in college, maybe because it has an end date and it's only 4 years and it goes by really fast, to do everything that I possibly can and to make the most of the experience, and also to check off the list of all the things that I want to accomplish. And even at my 5-year reunion, I remember talking to people and everyone shared in this feeling of being behind in life in some way. And these are some of the most traditionally successful people that I know in my life, people that have had incredible career success, and many people that, you know, have found love or even gotten married. And I remember thinking, oh, I haven't gotten married. Like, now I feel behind in that area of my life. But then people would tell me, oh my God, I'm so impressed by this. Like, how did you get there so, you know, fast in this other area? I think the secret is that everyone feels behind, but feeling behind implies that you can be on time or ahead because there's a timeline, and there really isn't a timeline. I think that urgency was conditioned in college, and it's very related to doing as much as possible, as quickly as possible. But the older I get, the less of an advantage I see to getting somewhere first. And in fact, if I had already achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, what would I do with the rest of my life? It'd be so boring. And so much of the fun of adulthood is just learning about myself and figuring out what I even want, which has changed so much since I was in school, since I graduated. So no, life is not a race. Yeah, the clock is ticking, but it really is just about the journey and how you want to spend your time and who you want to spend it with, and the evolution of yourself and your dreams and your wants and your people. Also, ultimately, the people that are ahead in the area of life that you're maybe jealous of probably prioritize that area of life more than you did. And you can't prioritize all the things, which is why inherently you're going to be ahead in some areas where you have put more investment and less far along in other areas. That is totally normal and natural and reasonable in the way things are supposed to be. I even remember, this is so embarrassing, but I had it on my bucket list of life for so long, like since high school, that I was gonna be on the 30 under 30 list, which literally does have a deadline. Once you turn, I don't know, 29 or 30, you're no longer eligible. I am very close to being 30, so I likely won't be on the list. I've given up the thought of it, but I think back to, why did I even care about that? Like, why is it that every year I would look at the list and I would recognize some of the people on it from college, and I'd say, okay, well, 1 year I'm gonna get on the list. There's nothing inherent about it besides prestige and validation of, oh, I did enough by that age to make it meaningful. But I think it just came from that conditioning of there being a timeline and needing to achieve a lot very quickly. So those were my 5 lessons that I had to unlearn. I hope that if you're in college and you've internalized some of these lessons, that you unlearn them faster than I did. And if you graduated, let me know if you related to any of this. Again, I don't think any of it is Harvard specific. And obviously I talked about the things that I had to unlearn. There were so many positive lessons that have stuck around with me and that have really benefited my life. So if you're curious about those, I'm happy to make a video about that. Just let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.